recovering addict named Richard, coming at you from South Florida Recovery Resources, and this is our first video in our video series on addiction and recovery. In this video we're going to focus on the nature of addiction and the nature of the addict himself. There's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation about addiction and recovery and what an addict is and what it takes to make an addict. Some people think that addicts are simply weak, that they lack discipline, that they maybe are lacking in some intelligence or whatever. Addicts don't lack in much, okay? That's the truth. Addicts are some of the most intelligent, creative, strongest people that you'll ever meet, and they have to be. They've had to be to survive. There are addicts that are judges, lawyers, doctors, policemen, journalists, any walk of life that you can imagine. There are people that suffer from the disease of addiction, and a great number of those people have suffered enough to end their careers or end their lives even. So, you know, when we look at TV, we look at the news, and we see this movie star or this rock star or this person is now dead, their life come to an unexpected and shortened halt. We wonder often, well, how is that possible? Why is that? Why did that happen to that person? They had all the resources at their disposal, perhaps, and yet they still couldn't find recovery. You don't have to be rich to find recovery. You don't have to be super intelligent. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be anything. All you have to do is have a willingness and a bit of an open mind. All right? Addicts, addiction itself crosses the globe, crosses every cultural boundary. There are addicts of every shape and gender orientation and description that you can imagine. There are addicts from Canada to Botswana, okay? There is nothing unique about addiction itself. It makes it endemic to a particular area. It is global, it is worldwide, and it's costing lives all over the world. These days, when we look at news reports, often we see addiction causing all kinds of carnage to all kinds of people. And I hope in this video series to be able to bring to you some enlightenment and some hope. First of all, when people first encounter recovery, their first attempt at that may be through a treatment center. Now, a lot of people don't have access to treatment centers, but many do. There are countries where there just simply are no treatment centers. So what about those people? When we go to a treatment center, often the first thing we hear is, the first question that we're asked is, you know, what were you addicted to? What was your drug of choice? And to believe that addiction is a matter of having an issue with a particular substance really misses the point from the beginning. My experience, addiction isn't about a particular drug. We hear a lot of argument about whether this particular drug or that particular drug is addictive. And what if we're asking the wrong questions? You know, what if it's not the drugs that are addictive per se? What if it's us? What if it's us that are addicted? And if we're addictive, then we can be addicted to anything, whether it be working out, gambling, compulsive shopping, you know, whatever substance you can think of. We can become addicted to pretty much anything if we have that predisposition. So it's not necessarily an argument to make to say that, well, this particular drug isn't addictive, it's not harming me. It's why we use that's really fundamentally important. It's why, you know, what is the inner motive for people to use in the first place, you know? Addicts in general share an inner gnawing dissatisfaction with self. And there's this feeling that pervades addicts in general that says that I don't quite measure up. I'm going to be laughed at. I'm not going to be taken seriously. I'm not going to have the esteem of the people that I want to have it from. And for these people, you know, for addicts in general, this has been there since before we ever used drugs. And, you know, I like to say that, you know, it wasn't drugs that turned me into an addict, rather it was being an addict that turned me on to drugs, okay? That this thing that is addiction was existing way before I ever picked up. You know, how is that possible? How is it possible to be an addict and not even use? You know, if not using makes me a non-addict, then it's pretty simple. but it really isn't. A number of people have gotten clean, and this is an area that we call abstinence, the simple not using of drugs. And this area of abstinence that we get into when we first stop using drugs can be exceedingly painful, okay? Because we found this one thing that we look for all our lives. You know, as we're growing up, we may have manifested any number of things in our lives to try to compensate for the fact that we didn't feel good about ourselves. We may have been an overachiever. We may have been isolative. We may have shunned away from people. We may have done any number of things, either sexually or whatever, in order to act out to feed this inner need, to feed this hole within us, this emptiness, this vacancy that resides within us in our deepest center of our being. And we look for something to fill that up, to make us feel okay, to make us feel relevant, to make us feel like we fit in, okay? So these people might become world famous musicians, okay? Because when they feel not very good about themselves to begin with, and then they learn how to play guitar and they strike a couple of chords, and the people around them say, hey, that's wonderful, look what you did, and they give them approval, okay? So with that approval, they feel a little bit fulfilled inside, okay? So seeking that approval, seeking that good feeling, that thing that makes them feel good about themselves, they may become very accomplished musicians and make a lot of money at that, you know? It is that inner gnawing dissatisfaction with self that drives us to find something to fill up, to make us feel okay for now. Even if that okay is just for 5 minutes, even if it's just going to be for a moment, we want to feel okay. And once we've experienced that, we'll do anything it takes to get back there, to get back to that place where we felt okay. Okay? So when I look back at my life, and I've done a lot of work on this stuff, okay, when I look back at my life, when I was 5 years old, okay, I was an addict. And I know it. I know it for a fact. You know, my mother thought it would be very cosmopolitan and sophisticated for me at 5 years old to sit down at the dinner table with the rest of the family and serve wine. Okay? And this was, the thought was, well, you know, the Italian people do it and the French do it and they drink wine all the time and it's very, very sophisticated and whatever. So, you know, whatever her motives were for serving this wine, she did, okay? So we had this dinner with this wine. And my brother and sister were seated at the table, and they each had a glass of wine, as did I. Well, I drank mine, and I loved it. From the first moment that I put that stuff into my body, I had this shiver go through me, and I felt good, man. I mean, I felt good now. And my sister didn't care for hers. She didn't want to drink it, so I drank hers. My brother, he didn't care for his either, so I drank his. Then I got a refill. I was smashed, okay? And for a 5-year-old kid, you know, I felt for the first time in my life that feeling of I'm okay, I feel good, I feel loose, I feel cool, I felt funny, and I loved this feeling, you know. Thereafter, every time I saw my mom making dinner, I would ask her, are we going to have wine for dinner? And she'd say no. And eventually she looked at me with this funny look because I pestered her for this wine pretty often for quite a while. And she looked at me with this look of grave concern on her face. And she said to me, you know, she just looked at me like she was really concerned about why I was so much wanting this wine. Now, even at that young, tender age, for some reason, a little background here, my mother had felt it necessary to share with me that my biological dad, whom I did not know, was an alcoholic. She called him a drunk. And that's why he wasn't around. And alcoholics and drunks were bad people, and we didn't want him around us, and this and that. So when she gave me that look, I realized she was thinking that I was going to be like my dad. And here's the thought, this is the point. Here's the thought I had when I read that look on her and I knew what it meant. Okay? What I thought was, she doesn't understand. Okay? I just like how it makes me feel. And that's really it in a nutshell, okay? So whatever it is that I do that can take me out of myself to make me feel better, even for a moment, has the potential to become something that I'm addicted to. Because it's not so much the substance, it's not so much the behavior, it's not so much the gambling or the promiscuity or the compulsive shopping or compulsive debting or anything else. It's not those things, it's in here. This is where the problem is, in here and up here. These are the thoughts that I have, these are the feelings that I have, and those things that I do that make me feel approved of, feel good about myself inside, these things can become a major problem for me. So recovery then becomes a process of filling that void. Okay, filling that with something else. All right. As I grew up, I looked for a lot of different things to make me feel better. I was an isolative kid. I used to spend a lot of times hiding away from the rest of my family, reading books and stuff. And I became a very, very well-read and very intelligent kid. By the time I was in 5th grade, I had a college-level reading ability. And that was because I spent so much of my time absorbed in books, trying to be someplace else, be somebody else in my mind's eye, in my imagination. I could be somebody else just for a short time. And during the time that I was reading that book, I was okay. I read a lot of Hardy Boys books back then. And for that moment, I could be somebody that had an adventure that other people looked up to, and that's what drove me at that time. Was I got into my older years and into my teenage years, I started experimenting with different drugs, and I thought I'd found home, man. When the first time I used, okay, I felt okay, and I thought that I'd found finally the one thing that had been missing in my life for all of my life. Finally something that made me feel okay, that I could have for myself in here that made me feel okay. Right? So this is when my addiction came into full bloom with drugs. I started using it in my teenage years, and by the time I was 20, I wanted to die. Okay? I was so devoid of hope, so filled with pain and hopelessness that I just wanted to die. And this is what happens to addicts. They try so many times over and over again to get clean. They try to find recovery. They try to do the right thing. They want to do the right thing. They want to stop using, but they can't. They can't. And it's frustrating. It's like living in hell. And you don't necessarily know what to do about it. Okay? And I'm going to help you with that. We're going to explore that together. Okay? We're going to find our way through this thing and find recovery. And I will help you along that pathway. All right? The people around me didn't understand addicts. When I thought of an addict, I thought all I knew about addicts was what I saw on TV. Okay, in the 70s on these TV shows, and addicts were people that had to have a needle in their arm, and they lived in alleyways, and they were dirty and stringy hair and all this other stuff. And they lived in rat-infested abandoned buildings. That's what I thought an addict was. That wasn't me. Therefore, I wasn't an addict. And unfortunately, a lot of people have that same kind of a mindset. They think, oh, I have a job, I pay my bills, I have a house, my car's paid up, and my kids are in school and they're doing well. I don't have a problem, I'm okay. These are just the outer trappings of normalcy. These are high-functioning addicts. But addiction and being what it is, there's still that sense of not being good enough. And sometimes even as parents, we'll try to overcompensate for that emptiness within us by having our children become straight-A students, or the best soccer player on the team, or the best baseball player, or whatever. We compensate through trying to get our kids to fill our needs, or we marry some person, some unfortunate soul that, as long as they're good looking and approved of us, we felt okay. Okay? None of that matters. None of that is going to make you feel better about yourself. None of that is going to bring you to the point where you have inner peace. And inner peace is our goal. Knowing who we are and being okay with who we are, and learning how to live and let live. Learning how to let go of control. Stop being controlled by fear. This is what our ambition is. This is what recovery begins to look like. If it was only about not going to jail, if it was only about being able to hold our job, then anybody could have recovery, real recovery, but it's not about that. Even people with long periods of time in being clean and being abstinent, okay? I've seen these people go into self-destructive modes because they don't have real recovery. Okay? Real recovery is what we're looking for. What is it? What is it really? Is it that pie in the sky, that idea that, oh, I'm going to get clean and everybody's going to approve of me, and people are going to owe me something, and I'm going to have a great job, I'm going to have a great car, I'm going to have a great spouse, and I'm going to have all these wonderful things, and we might hear people talking about how wonderful their lives have been since they've been in recovery. Okay? and they talk about all these wonderful things, but what if it's not like that for you? Because it wasn't like that for me. Okay? I didn't become staggeringly wealthy when I got clean. I didn't get handed the best kind of job you could possibly have. I didn't end up with a house or a wife and 3.2 kids and a golden retriever and a house with a pool and a picket fence. That wasn't me. And if that wasn't me, does that mean I didn't have recovery? Okay? So it's not about the external trappings. It's about what's in here. As I was growing up, you know, people tried the best they could to help me. They sent me to different states to live, to go to school. They put me in all kinds of different schools. They beat on me. They berated me. They emotionally, you know, beat me up saying, what's wrong with you? Don't you want to have this in your life? Don't you want to have that? You're throwing it all away. Don't you understand? And yes, I did. Yes, I did understand. The problem is, I didn't have the tools to work with. I remember I joined the service when I was 17 years old. I joined the Army, and I thought, these people are going to make a man out of me. These people are going to teach me discipline. I'm finally going to be able to put away the drugs. I'm going to accomplish great things. I'm going to be tough and disciplined, and this is going to be the answer. You know, and I went through basic training at 17 years old in Fort Knox, Kentucky. All right? And I went on to my permanent party station out in Colorado. Okay? And I went there with these hopes that, you know, I was going to be okay. I was going to be free of these influences and go on with my life. And what I found when I got there was that there were more drugs in the Army than I had outside, because everybody that was there was using. Okay? So there was no help for me there. Okay? We used all the time together, you know, and I can remember, you know, they did these urine tests, and I got caught on one of these urine tests. I tested dirty for marijuana. And, you know, I was sure that, you know, I needed to stop, and this was going to be the thing, the fear of another urine test happening. If I got caught twice, I'd be kicked out, dishonorable discharge and all that stuff, and this was going to keep me clean, and it didn't. And I remember sitting in my barracks on my bunk, and I was, you know, all alone, and I was sobbing, and I was asking God, please help me. No more. I don't want this anymore. I can't take this anymore. I was going nuts, man. I wanted to get clean more than anything else in my life. And I failed. Why did I fail? Because I didn't have the tools. And these tools are what I'm going to be bringing to you during the course of these videos. These tools are going to give you real understanding of what addiction is. Because again, if we don't understand what we're recovering from, how do we even know if we're recovering? Okay? You know, people throw about this word, oh, I'm in recovery. And they act like it's, oh, because I'm clean. No, it's not. I've seen people with 10 years clean go to jail for solicitation and ruin their marriages. Okay? They were in positions of importance. They were in positions of respect. And they had all kinds of stuff going on. And they still ended up destroying their lives because they didn't have real recovery. It's not about just not using drugs. Although that's where it starts. When we get clean, okay, and we arrive at this place where we're abstinent, that's the launching pad. That's just the starting point. That's not our goal. It's the launching pad that takes us into recovery. Okay, we can't have recovery without abstinence, but abstinence itself is painful. Okay, because we removed the one thing that made us feel okay about ourselves. Now what? So I've got to have something more. I've got to have something that makes me feel okay about myself. I've got to have something to grab onto and hold on that means something. Okay? And that's what we're going to explore together. I hope you stay with me. Thanks for being here.